You're listening to Melanated Rising, Episode 2. On this show, we inspire, uplift, and ignite Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color creatives and athletes. Here, we have open and honest conversations on topics and issues affecting us as people of color, as creatives of color, and how to take what limits us and turn it into what ignites us and our creative work. Every episode is an exploration into what is possible when Black and Brown creatives stand in our undeniable power. I'm your host, Kristen Iris.
And I'm Kalah Hill.
And welcome to Melanated Rising. Thank you guys for listening or watching, whichever medium you are on. We are here with Kalah Hill, who is amazing. And I actually connected with her last year, sometime in the fall, I think it was, and went through her program. So to tell you a little bit about her, as a bisexual, biracial woman of color, Kalah knows it is her responsibility to activate compassion, freedom, and truth within herself and within others. The potent medicine of compassion comes from radical self-love. As the founder of Pussy Consciousness, Kalah's intention is to reclaim the wisdom and truth of the feminine, the original womb of innocence in which we all come from. So thank you for joining us, Kalah. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So let's dive in. Let's talk about Pussy Consciousness. Now, like I said, I went through your program, and it was kind of a game changer for me, to be honest. I think it was 6 weeks, and I connected to you through a mutual friend of ours, well, one of your very close friends, and a live stream that I saw you guys do where you were doing pussy meditation. So I don't know, I guess we could just start there. Like, where did that meditation come from? Like, how did you?
Yeah. So I had been, where to start? To start at the beginning. So I guess a few months prior to that Facebook Live, I'd been in Costa Rica kind of scoping out whether or not I wanted to move down here. This was about a year ago now, almost. And I came back from that trip knowing that I was going to move to Costa Rica. And I was talking to my friend, Dana, who is a somatic life coach and our mutual connection. And I was like, Dana, I was like, my pussy told me to move to Costa Rica. And she's like, wait, hold on a second. She's like, I need to know more about this. So I kind of went through the different practices I had been doing just personally for the past few years, really harnessing my sexual energy and harnessing this kind of like Kundalini rising that was happening in me. And she was like, we need to go on a Facebook Live. We need to talk. People need to hear about this. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. Like, I didn't even really think about it. And then the next morning, I wake up and she's already posted on Instagram going live with Freedom Doula Kalah Hill to talk about Pussy Consciousness. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing it. So I didn't necessarily have a plan of what I was going to do on the Facebook Live, but I did a little meditation, like you said. There's like a womb meditation. It's like, focused on the womb space and the different ovaries. And it was a nice meditation, but we got over 3,000 views on this Facebook Live. And I was like, okay, I guess people are interested in this. Like, this is crazy. And Dana's like, yeah. And being like a somatic life coach, Dana's like, you need to teach a class, like, da-da-da. She's like coaching me through the whole thing. She's like, you're going to teach an online course. It's going to be great. I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll teach an online course. So Dana starts responding to all the messages, and she's like, yeah, like, get in contact with Kalah. She's going to do a 6-week online course. So I kind of was thrown in, or I like to say now gifted, this work, and it really has come through me in such an amazing way over the past 8 months of me being in business and have begun this movement now. And it's really in its infancy, which I'm really enjoying. And I always reference my business as like a little baby. So it's like my baby's 8 months old right now. So starting to eat solid, starting to like crawl and like actualize, you know, separation from mama. So it's like getting bigger and it's moving more and it's getting faster. So the momentum is building, and it feels really good to be here. So I just started. Yeah, I think you were in the first class, Kristen, the first 6-week course, and now I'm going into the third round here on the 19th of June. We'll be starting the third round of the group work, and I've also moved into doing private sessions, either one-offs or I have packages, private packages that people can buy for multiple sessions with me. So it's building and it's cool. So I'm happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you talked about you know, like you came back from Costa Rica and you were like, yeah, Pussy told me that I'm moving to Costa Rica. And if for those listening, like if they have not had like that connection, it can be like Dana, where she was like, wait, what are you talking about? And I think I would have been like, I was like that too when you were doing that live stream, and I was like, wait a minute, so like for like Pussy tells her things, and now I totally get it, because I have covered, like I'm constantly like every day I'm like, Pussy, what do you want to do? Like I totally tune into my body and tune into Pussy to help me make decisions, you know, to be like, which way do I, like, what do I really want to do? What do I need to be doing today? And I think that it's really helped me reconnect to my intuition in a way that's very different from how I was connected before. And I was actually very disconnected, but even like the way I thought of intuition, it made this really like changed how I connect to that. And so like do you like have conversations with your pussy every day?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when you start to engage with your sacred anatomy as a woman, you know, it's really potent and it's really powerful work. And most women are not doing this on a daily basis, you know, and not practicing skillfully. It's kind of like masturbation or self-pleasure is this kind of one-off thing that we do every once in a while just to have like a quick release and then move on with our day. And in that, you're really missing a very valuable component of your being that will elicit a lot of clarity for you. So the longer I've had a self-pleasuring practice and the longer I've really focused on harnessing my sexual energy and aligning with it and attuning it and just skillfully practicing with it and engaging with it on a daily basis, I've found massive clarity in my intuition and in my consciousness and being able to make clear choices for myself. So it's been a ride. It's been at times really challenging to understand what's going on, and then all of a sudden it's like an opening happens. As soon as I sit with something challenging, right? Because everyone has challenges. It's like as soon as I sit with that challenge and I really harness my breath and I harness my ability to talk with and engage with my pussy, like sometimes I literally talk to her, sometimes I touch her, sometimes I breathe into her. Like there's various modalities, and it always is ebbing and flowing depending on my mood. But as soon as I sit and I be with her, it's like something opens. And if you even just think about your nervous system, if you're trying to rewire your nervous system for success, if you're trying to rewire and integrate an embodied being into your daily life, go to the hub. So the clitoris, so we're going to just get into a little anatomy. The clitoris is the largest concentration of nerve cell endings in the human body, male or female. So if you're working with your nervous system and rewiring stuff, go to the hub, go to the source, right? And the other thing that's cool about the clitoris is that it's the only organ in the human body that's solely made for pleasure. Its only purpose is pleasure.
Yes.
So our access as females, as women who have this anatomy, we have a large physical access to something. Now, Pussy Consciousness is for everyone. I should clarify that. It's for men and women, non-binary. It's for everyone because we all come from pussy. That's how we get here. So it's our place of origin. But as a woman who has the anatomy, I would highly recommend getting curious about that anatomy because it's very special and unique. And it has a guidance GPS system within it that's going to take you beyond your wildest dreams, literally.
Yeah. I mean, it really does because even like between last year and like when we were ending the program and, you know, like we were having our last call and I'm like in the hospital emergency room, like trying to like join in on the call. And that that was the end
of yes. You
like,
called in. This is how powerful pussy is. You called in the last call from the hospital. That's amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't even admitting it. I was still like, I was in an ER bed. I was still like in the ER bed and they had not actually like put me in my, like, I was in like a little area, but they had not like put me in and taken me into like inpatient yet. And I had like just gotten off the plane and I was like, I'm getting on this call. Like I missed part of it, but I got on like the later part of it that I could do. And like from that point, that was like my, you know, my health crisis. And then the end of the year, I really had to take a break from running my business. And in that time, I was having a lot of negative feelings, but I had spent this time, these 6 weeks in particular, really connecting in, and it allowed me to come to go through that period and to come into the new year from a place of, okay, these are the changes I want to make in my business. This is who I really want to serve, and really get refocused and to know that the direction I was going was the right direction for me. Because it's like I had made so many adjustments and changes in the previous like 2 years of running my business. And when I got to like some of those decisions and started the year, I was like, yes, this feels so right. This feels so good. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And like, I knew that that was the direction that I was meant to go because I listened to Pussy. And like, because like I would ask, I'd be like, okay, is this who you really want to work with? Are you acting in fear? Like, is this who you really want to work with? Is this a yes? And she was like, yes. And like within like 2 weeks of me making that change, I signed a client into like my newly adjusted program. So it is like this like compass for us, you know, it is this compass. So, but something you said about, so like the clitoris is the only part of our anatomy that is purely, its only functionality is pleasure. And it has 8,000 nerve endings, and
it has 8,000 nerve endings.
Yes, 8,000 nerve endings. And I find it so interesting because the way this is something that is part of, like, as women with that anatomy, part of our anatomy, and yet society has put so much shame on us and so much shame on us for our bodies and for pleasure. And like, speak to that a little bit, like how, because for me, it's been part of that healing of that. But like, what are your thoughts on that, on the way that we have used and can use pussy in this connection to change these societal messages?
Yeah, so a lot of the work is dismantling patriarchal systems and patriarchal conditioning. And that has been going on for, 5,000 years or so, 5,000 plus. And so that's a big task. It doesn't happen overnight, and it definitely doesn't all dismantle within 6 weeks. I think the 6-week group course is kind of a catalyst and a jump start for you to really start to see clearly your conditioning within a patriarchal system. And a lot of us will internalize oppressive systems and be oppressors to our own selves in result. Mm-hmm. So as we start to kind of disintegrate and dismantle some of these falsities that we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves, about our bodies, about our capabilities, especially as women, then we get to see the truth. And Oprah made a sounding call, was it back in February, when she gave that big speech, and was just like, the truth is our greatest weapon. And I really heeded that call and that message and wanted to respond to that and answer that call. And so that's what I'm doing here too. It's like when we can really pull away the layers of a system that is oppressive, then we can start to see the core truths underneath that system. And a lot of the times, you know, the potency of a woman discovering her sexuality is very powerful. The patriarchy knows this. And I believe that a lot of the patriarchal systems that were established, i.e. the church, began out of fear of this power that women had within their sexual potency. So it's important for us to remember why things are the way they are, and it's important for us to pay homage to our history and our lineage, and at the same time to become present to the fact that, like, most women, especially in America right now, are in safe enough spaces where we can start to really gather and start to really pull apart some of these falsities of a patriarchal, oppressive, racist, misogynistic system, and really begin to shed light on the truth. We're safe enough now where that's okay. We're not going to get, well, there are people still getting killed. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that we are in safe enough spaces now and educated in a space where we can start to have these discussions and we can start to internalize our own freedom and claim our own freedom. So that's kind of the message there. And I use the route of sexuality and I use the access point of pussy as like a starting point. And that just unfolds and opens into such an expansive space that we could really go anywhere with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, like you said, the dismantling of patriarchal ideals and systems. And it's not just that we internalize it, like these oppressions in ourselves, but we end up perpetuating it in other people. You know, like when I think about some of the things I thought as a kid, it was like, oh, this is like, I don't want to do this because it's slutty, or this person's a slut because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, where did that come from? Because that didn't come from, like, that's not like my innate nature, you know? And like, these are things that now that I've changed in myself, and dismantled in myself. And I mean, this is not something that just happened like last November, but that was like for Pussy Consciousness, that was like a big thing for me. But even like dismantling it like over years, spending years trying to like examine these things, realizing like, oh, these messages are constantly being told to us, and from very, very, very young ages. Mm-hmm. And we have to be diligent about not only changing it for ourselves, but changing it for ourselves because we're going to pass that on, you know. And it's like, if you have kids, even if you don't have kids, the people that you interact with, those things get passed on and they cause more harm and more damage. And I'm not about perpetuating things that make people feel entrapped. I want to perpetuate things that are about liberation, you know, that are about dismantling that, about having a voice. And when you are not able to really live fully in your sexuality, then you're cutting off so much of yourself. Like this I've discovered over the years, like, oh my gosh, let's talk about how much you actually cut off.
You're cutting off your origin. I mean, you come from a space of sexual energy. It was a sexual act that created you. So you're literally cutting off yourself from your original space. And when you're not tapping into that, or when you're dismissing it, or you're not expressing it, it's like that's where we get inequality and we get injustices. And because when you can fully arise to that embodied space of being in your sexuality and fully expressed, that's equanimity, that's equality. When you can walk out your door and be fully embodied. You know, there's many women that are walking outside like completely disengaged because they're not in tune with their sexuality. And you know, I see this happening, you know, statistics don't lie either. It's like the rate at which, you know, women in college raise their hands compared to the rate at which men raise their hands. I mean, it's like such a variance, and we raise our hands like half the time that men do. We speak out half the time that men do, but yet we make 50% of the population. We make up 50% of the academic institutions. Like, we're there, but what are we putting voice? Are we speaking up? Are we asking questions? No, because this is the result of oppressive systems, and it's not about blaming or shaming anyone. It's about actualizing, like, this is the result of oppression.
Yes.
And that's okay. Not only is that, like, that's just a reality. It doesn't mean that it has to be forever, and it doesn't mean that we have to, you know, harbor on the past. It means that we reclaim it in that moment, and every day we work towards a better world. And that happens, and that starts with you. There's no way that you can go out and live in a different world if you're not yourself different and changing and evolving and growing and developing as an individual. It's just, you make up the world, you make up society. So if you want a different culture and you want a different society, it's got to start with you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I love that, because especially lately, I've been thinking so much about, like, what is it, like what is my vision, not only for my future, but like, what's my vision of the world? Like, what is the kind of world that I want to create? And I think we should all be asking that, especially as people of color and women of color, and whatever other intersections that some of our, like, the listeners may be part of, that I feel like, especially as people of color, we are so powerful, and our voices are so powerful, and we have a real power and responsibility to use that power to create change in the world. Like, how is it that we want to shape the world? What are the things that we want to change and break down and dismantle so that we can all live in more equality? And if you are, one of the things that helps me with that is that I have connected to even deeper to that creative energy, because sexual energy is creative energy. You are creating life. I mean, not always creating life every time you do it, but it is like that that is used to create life, and it's the same energy that you can use to create everything else, you know? And so if we are cut off from that, then we're not fully accessing our power. We're not fully accessing our potential. And we need to, because we need to create change in this world. There's so many things. I have, like, such a big vision of what I want.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and you know, there's a lot to be done. And I think a lot of people feel hopeless, or they have this sense of, like, well, who am I to do anything? They get so overwhelmed by externally all of the stuff that's going on currently in our political situation, in our, you know, in our world. There's a lot going on, and there can be massive overwhelm and this sense of, like, well, it's just me. I can't do anything to change this. And that's what keeps systems of oppression in place. Is, I can't remember the quote exactly. I think it's MLK. He said there's, like, nothing worse than, like, a complacent white man or something, like when he was talking about the race issue. Do you know this quote?
Oh, I don't remember the quote, but I know what quote you're talking about. I just don't remember exactly what it was.
And there's other quotes too, like, you know, where it's like, if you're not choosing a side, then you're choosing the oppressor side.
Yes.
You know, just stuff like that, where it's like, you got to really sit and start to take responsibility for your life and for yourself, because we're adults, and we need to start to actualize our impact. Now, that's really challenging to do, because you've heard of the butterfly effect, right? It's like we can't follow the trail of impact, but we have to believe that we are impactful, because it is proven scientifically that waves go out as soon as one act happens. These waves go out. And I reference Harriet Tubman a lot, because I feel like she really activated this within her own constitution and within her own life. And really, Harriet Tubman was freaking badass, first of all.
Yeah. Let's talk about this.
Because this woman was a slave and decided one night, she's like, it's either life or death right now. Like, this is insane. It's like, I am a slave. I don't know what's going on. So she had to really choose her freedom first for herself. And she ran away, right? She ran away. She escaped to Canada, and she was like, good, you know, like, she's like, okay, I'm free. Now, she did not just sit in Canada, like, I'm free, now I'm good, all's well, I ain't got anything else to do. She took that rising within herself and that energy of established freedom within her own constitution, and she chose, with freedom of choice, to come back thousands of times to free hundreds, thousands, if not more, slaves in the Underground Railroad, and develop a system called the Underground Railroad. This was established by a woman of color.
Yep.
Okay?
In a time where we weren't even considered fully human. We were not considered whole entire human beings.
No, and she claimed her wholeness regardless. That is such an act of rebellion. That is such a revolutionary act for someone to stand and claim their freedom under, like, legit oppressive systems. Like, she risked her life hundreds of times. She risked her life for freedom. So if you can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes and ask yourself questions of, like, what is my impact? How do I feel today? Do I want to make this choice for myself? Come on, think of Harriet Tubman. Think of people that came before you and really risked it all so that we could have the privilege to sit in our homes and ask questions like these.
Yes, that is powerful. That makes me think of, so on my phone, this is so great, because it makes me think, on my phone, there's this mural or painting that I think is in New Orleans. I don't remember who painted it, but it's like a Black woman, and she's wearing a shirt, and it says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." And I have that on my phone as my wallpaper to remind myself, because one of the things that I've been thinking about in the last couple of years is, like, I am here because of the strength and the resilience and the sacrifices of the people who came before me, especially as a Black woman and a woman of color. My ancestors were the survivors. Like, they were the survivors of what was, like, attempted genocide, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about the actions that I take, I think about, I have a responsibility to my ancestors, and I have a responsibility to my daughters and my daughters' daughters. I don't have any daughters, but my future daughters, my daughters' daughters, and my sons and my future sons and their future sons, to be all of who I am and to do everything that I can to create a better world. and to break down these systems. Like, I think about that, like you said, Harriet Tubman, and think about Harriet Tubman. It's like, what did my ancestors go through so that I could sit here? So I could sit here and waste my life? No, so I can sit here and create more change for the people who are coming after me.
Yeah. And it's really, it's a responsibility to yourself too.
Yes.
You know, like you have a responsibility to yourself to access your privilege. And see, this is the issue with oppressive systems, is they like to tell you that you don't have privilege. I remember I took this privilege course last year, 2 years ago. I was doing, I was in the midst of, used to be a postpartum doula, so I was working in the birth world a lot, and I took a course on being, working with LGBTQ, and we went through just like various privileges, and I went in thinking like I have no privilege. I'm like, bisexual woman of color, like, come on, I'm gonna like have nothing to write down. It was so eye-opening for me to see all the privileges that I do have. I have a lot of privileges. I'm able-bodied. I'm not disabled physically in any way. I have a higher education degree. I have access to many resources because of that, so it's like I have many privileges, and I need to start taking advantage of those, because this is what we like to talk. We like to talk a lot about white privilege, and that's great. And it's like, we have privilege too. As people of color, we have massive privilege. If you're alive and breathing on this planet, you have privilege. And the thing with privilege is not about blame or judgment. It's about access. So when you have a privilege, you have access, right? Mm-hmm. So I have the privilege of pleasure. I have the privilege of experiencing pleasure in my body. So I have access to something that people who are in chronic pain don't have access to on a daily basis. What does that mean? That means that I can build a platform from that space, and I can help others onto that platform. I can say, here, I'm opening the doors to pleasure, and this is my invitation for you to come in, right? Just like any other platform of privilege. Yeah. So recognize your privileges, access them, and use them, because it's impactful. And it's going, I really want to be an ally. I want to be an ally for any group that I'm not a part of. So I like to research, disability, groups that work with physical disabilities, or groups that work with, body image, overweight, because there's a lot of, larger bodies out there, and I have a very socially acceptable body. So I'm like, how can I be an ally for women and men who are experiencing body terrorism on a daily basis and body shaming when they walk out the door just because they're larger? Like, I want to learn about all the groups that I'm not a part of so that I can be an ally, because these movements don't get won alone. Like, we always need allies to come in and support us in these causes. So I really, in my group courses, advocate diversity and advocate there being intersectional conversations, because that's what makes movements succeed. And you see it in, the civil rights movement of the 60s. It's like, as soon as good white folk from New England, Boston area, started coming down south to march in these marches and ride on these buses, that's when you saw the police stop tear gassing. That's when you saw the police stop shooting, because they're not going to shoot white people. You know what I mean? So it wasn't until these people started becoming allies and coming down and working with the civil rights movement that we were even allowed to march without getting shot. You know what I mean? So it's like that moved the movement forward in such a strong way. And it wasn't about, who's leading who. It was like, who's coming together? Who's coming together to support?
Yes.
So I want to be supportive, and I have a lot of access to pleasure. I've developed a very strong self-pleasuring practice, and I can turn on my sexual energy at the drop of a dime. Like, super easy for me. So I want to advocate for that, and I want to support that, and I want to allow access to that for everyone else, because I shouldn't be the sole one who has access to something like that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That was so clear, and like talking about privilege and access. Like you're like, I have a platform and I'm helping you onto it. And I think that's a lot of times what I see missing in movements, or even in sometimes like people who are talking like wellness is a big area where it's like, are you talking about all bodies, or are you only talking about like you said, the socially acceptable bodies? Like both of us have privilege. Like we are both like we are both cisgendered women who have very socially acceptable bodies. And even in my socially acceptable body, I've had like, self-consciousness and things that I'm working on, and shame, which this reconnection is sexuality, and like Pussy especially has helped to heal some of that and clear some of that. And I think the work you're doing is so powerful. And I feel like that healing can happen in so many different areas of people's lives when they connect in.
Yes. Every person should have access to pleasure. I don't care how big, tall, short, skinny, fat, blonde, blue, brown, male, female, non-binary, trans, gay, straight. I don't care. Every single human being should have access to pleasure.
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. And there's so many people out there who are like not only just like not just like, oh, I'm having a tough time, or I'm really unhappy in life or something like that, but like even just in their bodies are disconnected from any sense of pleasure, or even disconnected from their bodies. Like I used to teach yoga and do body work, and it's like some people just had no idea what their bodies were doing, where I'd be like, okay, bring your out to the side, and they're like, here, and I'm like, that's not the side. And they're like, what? And they look and they're like, oh, like they did not even know like where their body was, and so there's this like huge disconnect, and we're always up in here, and there's so much wisdom and so much power when we go deeper in and especially into our sexuality and into pussy.
It's so powerful. It's really amazing. And it's like, it's something that I strongly believe is about taking responsibility for yourself. It's time, I think, for us to stop shaming, because you're really, by apologizing for your body or apologizing for your sexuality or hiding from it, it's really, you're perpetuating victimhood. Like you're just perpetuating being a victim, and then it's like time to step up your game in taking responsibility for your body and for accessing what your body's gifts have and messages have for you, because you're a whole being. We're not just from the head up. Like we are a whole system that was divinely created. Like I talk about this a lot, about the womb space, and when you're in embryo, like you weren't sitting there like figuring out like, oh, how's my hand gonna grow, or how's my nose gonna grow today? Like every organ and part of your body, what came from an internal knowing that creation is possible, and that creation not only is it possible, but it's happening, and I'm just reveling in the fact that creation's happening right now, and I'm going to become a human being without questioning how that's going to take place. You literally became a human. And I work with clients sometimes, and I'm just like, so great that you think you're going to figure this out, but that's a really audacious statement to make when you became a human being without figuring anything out. That makes sense. Like I'm like,
yeah, really? I'm like, I didn't think about that. Like when we were just growing, and like
we were just
like fingers were forming, and like a liver was being created.
You see it in nature all the time, right? Like it's like an apple tree is not sitting there, figuring out how it's going to make enough apples, to compete with the pear tree, because if it doesn't make enough apples, the pear is going to get all the accolades and all the recognition. Like, a lot of our thinking is really false and has nothing to do with creating life, creativity, pleasure, ecstasy, enjoyment. Moving in this world really has very little to do with what our mind has made up that it has to do with. And it has more to do with, like, literally just being, which is a huge discipline. That's not easy, but we can do it together, and we can do it step by step. Like, these are small steps that we're taking towards progress, and we're taking towards ownership of self, so that we can walk out the door and feel in our bodies, feel so aligned in our bodies that we can then create impact, we can then create change, we can then create movements. You cannot do that if you're not taking these small steps towards owning your shit.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad that you finished that with talking about, like, then you can take steps to, create impact, because this is not to say that, like, you are not supposed to take action, that you are not supposed to, to do things, that, like, things are just going to come floating your way. It's not to say that, but it is like, you have to be with yourself.
Yeah, it's an intricate. It's an intricate dance, because we can start talking about feminine and masculine energies, which I do a lot talk about. And the feminine is really the creatrix. She's the muse. She's the inspiration. She dances around and she's super fast and she's like, ta, 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 like, watch me. And then the masculine is really this energy of, like, in service to that inspired space. So it's like, we want to tap into our feminine first, so that we can take an inspired action, inspired in spirit. We're accessing something much deeper and much more real than this external 3D world. And in that access, we can then act from a space that is much more easeful, much more graceful, much more directed and focused. You think about the masculine, it's a focused, directed energy that can manifest structure into reality. So we want to work from a space of feminine guidance and feminine inspiration, so that our masculine, our action-oriented aspects of self can really thrive. Because there's people who are striving and never arriving right now. There's people who are beating a dead horse up against a wall. There's people who are really struggling to feel momentum. And what I'm saying is, like, if you sit down for a moment and you access some of this playful, feminine, delighted, ecstatic sensuality, you're going to find a lot more space to act. And you're going to find a lot more time to easily traverse your life. That's the result.
I like that. I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
That's something I'm still working on myself.
Me too.
Yeah. And I remember when we had a call last year, and you were like, you are, like, in this future right now, you're, like, projecting this future that hasn't actually happened. And you're like, just bring it back. Bring it back to here and connect in, because then you're going, when you listen, you're like, then you're going to be guided where you need to go. You're gonna feel it. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And it was hard because I'm very, like, I was very, less so now, but more then, was like, action, and I have to know how this is going to lead to this and this to this, because I didn't trust myself, because I had disconnected. And so that was really hard for me. And, like, making that switch was one of the reasons why this was such a game changer for me. And it's not that necessarily, like, everything is great, but I feel like I'm at least moving in alignment with where I really want to be going. And what I want to be doing and who I want to be helping. So, in creating things, like even creating this podcast. So all of that is, like, in that direction. There is something that I wanted to ask you about, and I asked you about this after we did the program, and I want to touch on this because we are two, like cisgender women. For anyone, just if you don't know what cisgender means, it means that you identify with the sex that you were born with. And so how can, like we are both women. I went through Pussy Consciousness. Everyone in my group was cisgendered. And so like, how can this be something that is accessible to people who do not have pussies?
Yeah.
Like, how can this be something that is still powerful for them as well in learning and connecting to Pussy Consciousness?
That's such a great question. So I had my first male client, cisgendered male client, last month. Yeah, it was last month. And I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to work with a man. This is interesting. Like, it was my first one. And he was so into it. It was like such a great session. He was like booking more sessions after that. He's like, I just love everything that, you're saying. And I think that all genders and however you identify, really like all human beings on this planet have access to their origin and have access to sexual energy, because that's where we come from. And it's not about sex. Like, this is what a lot of people think that the course is about, or the work that I'm doing is like, oh, it's all about sex. And so I talk about like penetration and like heteronormative sex culture. And it's like, no, like that's not where we go at all. There is an anatomy and physiology component of it, but it's not about whether or not you actually have that anatomy and physiology. It's about understanding that that's where you come from. So every single one of us grew in a womb space and came from this place that was our portal to life. It's how we came through onto this planet. And it's about honoring and revering the spaces in which we come from so that we can really honor ourselves, because I do believe that our origins and our places of origin have impact on us. As people of color, it's like our origins of Africa. Like, we want to know more about those spaces. We want to know more about our history and our culture and our lineage. Why do we want to know more? Because that helps us understand ourselves better. So every single person in discovering pussy can get to know themselves better. It's not a sexual thing. It's not like just for women who have pussies. It's not just for heterosexual men who are into pussies. It's not the sex. It can be. That can be the topic of conversation if that's where the conversation goes. But I want to have more conversations. I want to have conversations with trans men and women. I want to have conversations with non-binary. I want to have conversations with women who have had hysterectomies and no longer have that anatomy. I want this to be exclusively inclusive. This is exclusively an inclusive space. So it's really important for me to have those conversations. So like, this is me kind of asking if anyone is listening to this or hearing this conversation, like, please reach out to me, because as a cisgendered woman, like, I can't speak, for the other categories of identification in terms of gender and sexuality, So I want to hear from everyone. I'm very interested, and I like it is really an aspiration of mine to hold space in that, because there's too many spaces in this personal development and self-help world that are very white and very heteronormative spaces. Yes. And that has to end like now. So reach out to me. Let's chat. Yes. Yes. I want to have different conversations.
Yes. And that about like the wellness and like spirituality world and being very like white and heteronormative. That's actually one of the reasons that I work with people of color. Like, that's one of the things people ask me all the time is like, well, why only with people of color? I'm like, because we have certain things that we have to deal with that other people don't. And so much of this industry and so much of really like spaces and self-help or whatever, personal development, personal transformation, are white centric. And we should not always have to shove ourselves into white spaces and not have spaces that are our own. So it's really powerful to have these different to be able to come into a space and like feel like you are being like held and respected. And I feel like that's absolutely, you know, what you do. And I love that even though this is something that is called Pussy Consciousness and is about pussy, but it's really something that is very accessible to everybody. And this is something that, I mean, think about what would shift if more men were doing this and learning to like really revere and honor pussy instead of just like this very kind of toxic patriarchal view of like, this is the receptacle for my pleasure. And it's like, no, it's so much more. Bow to the pussy.
It's so much more. It's so much more. And you know, my one friend, she's amazing. My friend Erin Brown, she's a speaker and feminist and lecturer. She's just like, you know, feminism is not a niche topic. Like, women make up 50% of the population. Like, if there's a book written about women, all of a sudden it gets placed in this category of that it's a book for women.
Yes.
And it's like, well, no, because books written about men aren't called books for men, i.e. the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, no one's the whole Bible is about men. You know, there's like 5 women mentioned in the whole thing. No one's going around saying this is a book for men. Like, just because something's solely about a woman and her anatomy and how she functions, it doesn't mean that it's only for women.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. All right. So tell everyone where we can find you.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. My website is pussyconsciousness.com. And my name is spelled very uniquely. So my Instagram and Facebook is just Kalah Hill. So it's KALAH HILL, which you can probably see in the notes somewhere.
Yes, I will be putting those in the notes. Like she said, if you reach out to her, have a conversation. Let's expand this conversation. Let's get the conversation going in other places. And let us know what you guys are thinking about this conversation and how it's impacting you, what it's opening up for you. And if there's like something that you're being called to do, go do it.
Yes. And if there's like something in your body that's like really getting excited right now in this conversation, please reach out to me. This is a grassroots movement. So it's all word of mouth. I do word of mouth invitations monthly for various opportunities, various workshops, various programs. So please reach out to me. I'm like very friendly and I like to chat. So yeah, DM me, PM me, email me, and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. As someone who's worked with her, I could say that. So thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And this was great. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you, Kristen.
I absolutely loved having this juicy conversation with Kalah. There were so many gems in here about pleasure, power, privilege, and our capacity to create massive change in the world and to dismantle the oppressions by connecting into ourselves. Before you go, head on over to kristenirus.com/vision to go get my free workbook and video guide, Create Your Future Vision. This workbook is going to help guide you into tuning into what you really want to create for yourself, for your life, for the world, and to start bringing that into your everyday and creating massive change right now. Please do me a favor, if you enjoyed this show, leave an honest review on iTunes. This is the best way to help other people find this show and to be empowered by these amazing and deep dive conversations that we are having. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or on my YouTube channel if you are watching on my YouTube channel. And as always, until next time, stand in your power, stand in your color, and stand for what you create.